Welcome back. Still tuned in to News and Views of myself, Salado Makwidiri. We are right in the middle of the second hour of the show, and we really appreciate that you stayed with us for this duration. And yeah, we're going to be switching gears now from Africa to the Middle East as the dust continues to settle from the recent Israel Iran military flare up. Benjamin Netanyahu is claiming what many are calling an unearned victory, while Tel Aviv insists that Iran's nuclear program has been sent down the drain. Intelligence assessments and global analysts say otherwise. They're suggesting only a temporary delay, but not total destruction. But yet, Benjamin Netanyahu has used this moment to reposition himself as Israel's wartime hero, a narrative recycled from decades of warmongering, deflection, and what some argue is an ever deepening descent into authoritarian kind of rule. So yeah, we'll be touching a bit on that, from Iran's so-called empire of evil to be continued carnage in Gaza, where over 56,000 Palestinians have now been killed. Netanyahu's war politics continue to serve his grip on power more than the cause of peace. He's wanted by the ICC. He's defied the very ceasefire his allies helped broker. And now, even some of his staunchest supporters in the US, like Steve Bannon, we saw, his Twitter rant, are accusing him of betrayal and manipulation. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the slaughter continues. Israeli hostages remain unreturned, and no alternative, to Hamas and, a new system in Gaza has been presented. Netanyahu's political survival, I think at this point we can all agree, may have been bought with Iranian blood. But in true essence, it is Palestinian lives that continue to pay the daily price. And joining me now to break down the truth behind the ceasefire spin and what Netanyahu's next move may be is Hassen Seria. He's South Africa correspondent for Press TV. Hassen, thank you so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you on Salam Media. Again, really appreciate you giving us the time this morning. Hope you're well.
Thank you very much, Salalu, for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. I think, yeah, Netanyahu is already spinning, the 12th day war as, a very, very decisive victory for himself over Iran. But from your vantage point, how real is this victory and what's being hidden behind the headlines?
I think when we look at the overall situation, we get a clearer picture that this is really all about the theater of war. Everything from the US going in with those B-2 bombers, dropping those bunker busters onto, for example, the Fordo site, onto the nuclear sites in Iran, Isfahan, as well as Natanz. This was all about a show of force. I think what it confirms is that the Americans are willing to, at some point, get involved actively and place themselves on the front line. That is what Benjamin Netanyahu certainly has achieved with this 12-day aggression against Iran that he launched. When we look at it from the broader perspective, however, we realize that the Israelis, and this is not just our assessment, but even on the home front, within Israel itself, and now we've seen even from the United States as well, is that despite the statements that are being made by people like Donald Trump as well as Benjamin Netanyahu, is that the reality is that Iran's nuclear program was not affected either to the extent that they are claiming, which is obliteration, or even as Benjamin Netanyahu himself used the word destroyed, that is not the case. The Iranians have said that they were able to remove the nuclear material from the sites before the strike, which means that they anticipated that the US could get involved at this level. And of course, this is confirmed by the IAEA, which has confirmed as well that there has been no sort of nuclear leakage within these areas. So when we look at it on that level, whether the nuclear sites were destroyed or not, whether Iran's nuclear stockpile of enriched uranium was affected, then the indications are that these strikes were not as effective as they had hoped. But I think this was also a moment for Trump to sort of prove some sort of power, which he thinks he has actually managed to do with Iran by striking these military sites, and in that way bringing Iran to the table, or bringing Iran to a level where it cannot pose any threat, as Israel and the United States would like to believe, to the Zionist regime. When we look
Mm,
at it, however, on the flip side, what this has now left is an Iran that was very, very compliant with the IAEA. Remember, a lot of the agreements in terms of the assessments at the Iranian nuclear facilities was voluntary assessments by the Iranians. The Iranians offered to put in cameras that had 24-hour surveillance, all of those things, allowing the inspectors that are permanently in Iran, to have full access to the sites. And that now the Iranian parliament has actually passed a bill that says we will sever our cooperation with the IAEA. So if you look at it from that perspective, before you had a full view of exactly what the Iranians are doing as far as the nuclear program is concerned, now you don't, because of this aggression by Israel. It has pushed Iran to this point where it has said that you are not an honest broker. You were sitting at the table negotiating with us, and here your biggest ally, which is an implant within the region, carried out these attacks. And at the end of the
mm.
day, you even joined in by directly attacking our nuclear facilities, which in any case, as the Iranians have always said, are for peaceful purposes.
Mm, 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 mm. Before the Iran strike, before this 12-day war, Netanyahu's coalition was already crumbling. Public support was waning, and there was pressure that was mounting internationally, which still is over Gaza. To what extent, can we say this war with Iran was a chance for a political lifeline rather than a security necessity for Benjamin Netanyahu, looking at his incredible and marvelous failures in Gaza?
Well, I think if we look at the posts of Donald Trump within the past 24 hours, he's actually, because now, as you mentioned, those woes have not gone away. There are suggestions that Netanyahu is being summoned to court again come Monday. And Trump is now actually directly involving himself in the work of the Israeli judiciary. Not that we give any legitimacy to that judiciary,
Mm,
but by saying that he must either be given a pardon or that the charges against him must be dropped. When we look at it from Benjamin Netanyahu's side, there is not just a belief by him, there's actually a conviction by Benjamin Netanyahu, and he himself has stated this on more than one occasion, that he sees himself as a savior for Israel. This takes it into a new realm, So if you believe that you are the savior, then no one else can take that position. You are the chosen one. And by that means, it gives you the power or the ability to be able to take any sort of action that you so wish in order to remain in power and to maintain that position. And that is exactly what we've seen here with the behavior of Benjamin Netanyahu previously, and particularly now during this Al-Aqsa flood, where at every point where we saw the possibility of a ceasefire coming into effect, a cessation of hostilities in the Gaza Strip, that there is a new maneuver or new attempt by Benjamin Netanyahu. The question now is, as you pointed out, with this attack on Iran, with Trump's very stern warning as such to Benjamin Netanyahu, and with both of them saying that we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, or sort of, for now at least, taken Iran's capability out of the equation as a threat to Israel, as they put it. The question then is, what is his next move going to be? And I think from that perspective, not that one can say that this is definitely going to be, but I think for us from the Palestinian side, that raises a lot of concerns, because at the moment, Palestine is the only ones that he really has or wields that sort of aggressive power over. And the Palestinians, as we've been seeing, have been enduring for about 2 years now this intensified genocide that has been carried out. It is not being stopped by the Europeans or the Americans or even the Arab regimes that have all sat by. It is not being stopped by them. So I think if we were to assess the possible way in which Benjamin Netanyahu may intensify, it will be unfortunately, yet again against the Palestinians, Salailo.
Hmm, concerning indeed. You touched a bit on Donald Trump, and I think you encroached a bit on my next question. The focus on U.S. and Israel relations, and the Trump factor. We saw Trump very, very furious at Israel's breach of the ceasefire, a ceasefire that he brokered. We saw him even dropping the F bomb. We saw people like
Mhm.
Steve Bannon themselves himself calling Benjamin Netanyahu a liar. Is Israel beginning to lose even the unwavering support of the American far right? Something that we've been seeing little traces of, but not really as much as we've seen in the last couple of days.
I don't believe that to be the case. I think what we're seeing is this is in line with the personality of Donald Trump. This is also, I think, part of the conflict that the Americans are having over an America First policy and their conviction about the important place that Israel plays within the region. So I think we will continue to see this sort of tussle, but at the end of the day, America is unwavering in its belief and conviction that Israel, the land of that has been promised to these particular individuals, that land should remain within the region. What they are now looking at from a bit of a different perspective is the expansion of the so-called Abraham Accords, and we've seen that posters and so on have already been published, which shows the expansion of the Abraham Accords, essentially to take in all of the Arab regimes. Now that Syria, for example, which was staunchly against the Zionist regime, is now controlled by a terrorist force. Now that we see that in many of the other regions, the way is sort of being opened up, because the idea is that Iran has been neutralized for the time being, at least, that these countries will now be able to join this Abraham Accords, and that is what will give the security to the Zionist regime. On another level, what we've also heard was from the Israelis themselves saying that when they launched this attack against Iran, that the Arab countries, who also some of them try to present Iran as an enemy within the region, that they've also said that this is the Israelis, that these Arab countries must bear in the financial responsibility of
Mm,
the military cost of an attack or a response to Iran. So what we are seeing here is an attempt by the Americans now, as they've done previously, for example, with the war in Yemen as well, is to devolve that sort of responsibility, financially at least, from the US, get the Arabs involved, get them part of this broader coalition as protectors, as such, of Israel and its presence within the region, and in that way to sort of try to establish a counterforce, if you could put it loosely, almost as a NATO for the West Asia region. And I think that is where the Americans would. But the Americans will not. The Americans will definitely not abandon Israel. And this is also true for the Europeans, because despite whatever comments the Europeans have made, when it came to the attacks on Iran, they were very clear, and they came out immediately, unequivocally, saying that there's legitimacy to these attacks, even though that counters international law.
I want to look at things from an Iranian point of view right now. Despite the Israeli claims, we are seeing Iran's regime remaining firmly in place. Some arguing that this 12-day war actually has made it stronger. People are rallying behind the flag of Iran and the supreme leader. And we, as you mentioned, also that we might also see Iran intensify its nuclear program and seek stronger deterrence even more aggressively than before. How would you analyze the state of affairs in Iran right now, and what the future might potentially look like for the current regime, and most importantly, their place in the Middle East?
I think within responding to this, I think we've got to, we as media have to sort of read behind, between the lines, behind the words as such. So firstly, Iran is a state. Iran is a formidable state. It has mechanisms in place when it comes to everything from the selection of the supreme leader of the country. It is a country that has consistently held elections. Its governments have managed to fulfill their terms. It has a functioning and operational parliament. For example, even if we look at the decision to sever ties with the IAEA, or at least block the inspections from Iranian nuclear facilities, even during this time of war, Parliament still found a way to sit, and the procedure was followed. And when we see Iran operating on an international scale as well, even during this period, that they have maintained that sort of system. So we're talking here about a formidable state. That's number one. I think number two is, if you look at the way in which the media traditionally covers Iran, it is with a negative spin. So even despite the suggestion of opposition within Iran, the question is, to what degree is that? Is that part of organizations such as the Mujahideen Khalq, which is essentially a cult organization that operates from Western capitals? They've, of course, been expelled from Iraq as well, where they, for a very long time, had a base and so on. But to what degree are these entities really a formidable challenge to the Iranian government? Then we've got, of course, the son of the former Shah, Pahlavi, who also is hoping for some sort of position. But if
Mm.
we understand what is his link to the land, and I'm talking here not from a heritage perspective, but at this point in time, what sort of following does he command? When we try to break it down like this and try to look at the reality of the situation, we see that the Iranian government, the Iranian system, is one that is still a formidable system, and that these challenges are not really true challenges in the true sense of the word. That said, we of course are not unfamiliar with the Americans and so on putting in place weak sort of regimes where they have carried out coups. We can look at, for example, at Afghanistan, we can look at Iraq, we can look at a number of countries where the Americans have actively been involved in engaging in coups and overthrowing the legitimate governments of countries. So from that perspective, yes, there is a concern. At this point in time, it seems like America has put that sort of plan on the back burner. Of course, whether Israel may still try to pursue such a plan, that is to be seen. What we do know also over this period is that we've seen there are a number of gangs that are trained and supported by Israel that are operating within Iran, both as
Mm.
spies and as saboteurs. And we've seen that the Iranians have continued to carry out arrests and so on, that these individuals have continued with attacks. We've seen, for example, overnight, there were certain drone interceptions in Iran as well. So I think that sort of level of warfare is going to continue. The question here for Iran is, with the scale of these operations that have now been revealed by these Iranian investigations, the amount of drones that they found within the country, the amount of explosives, all of those things, is where was the Iranian system prior to this 12-day period?
Mm.
Where was Iranian intelligence prior to that period? Why were they not able to, prior to this attack by Israel, to actually intercept and understand that these operations are happening within the country, and to also clamp down on them? Naturally, in such a state, you will not get all of them, but there was no indication from the Iranians that they'd actually achieved these sort of achievements against these individuals. What we had, for example, was the Iranians saying that they managed to get a major intelligence leak from Israel from that side. So maybe on the international scale, the Iranian intelligence is working, but what's happening in the country? And as we've seen here, that is perhaps the soft underbelly of the Iranian system, and that is where they need to focus. So if we're looking at concerns about whether there will be a coup in the country, that is probably the domestic front is where the Iranians must look, but not necessarily from a political perspective, because what we've seen over this period is Iranians have actually coalesced and come and united around the Iranian flag,
Mm.
irrespective of their political differences, irrespective of even whether they have issues of religion with the state as such, that the
Mm.
state should be a religious system or a secular system. They've all come around the flag of Iran, and I think this speaks to the the type of civilization that Iran is, that you're talking about a very proud nation here, the Persian nation, and that is what they came together against, because they were essentially being attacked here by foreign aggressors in the form of Israel, which is essentially European and a Western imposed system, and then, of course, the Americans as well.
No, definitely, Hassen. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Always a pleasure chatting to you, and yeah, hope we chat soon. Really, really appreciate your insights, and yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you again probably next week as the situation in the Middle East continues to unfold.
Certainly a situation we'll have to keep an eye on. Thanks, Alele.
Definitely, Hassen, Seria, Press TV correspondent here in South Africa, keeping a keen and close eye on the Middle East and this 12-day war between Israel and Iran, and really, really unpacking all of the different elements to it. If you missed this conversation, you can head over to our website. It will be podcasted later today, and there'll be a wonderful article written about some of the most important points that Hassen has made. What do you think? Is it victory or illusion? Israel claiming victory of the 12-day war with Iran, but the United States of America, on the other hand, saying, well, we didn't, make that much damage. I think international analysts also, sharing the same sentiment that Iran's nukes have survived, and it almost feels like we are in a place where Iran itself is going to intensify its nuclear programs and seek stronger deterrence even more aggressively than ever. So, can that be considered a victory by Israel? You can engage with us. You can let us know what you think. Our studio line is 011-680-0355. On WhatsApp, you can send us a voice note or a message on 061-766-0355, or you can drop a comment on this live video, and we'll read it out on air. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues.